to that is a lot of people are coming from different aspects of design. Maybe you're just getting started out. Maybe you've been doing it for a number of years. I know that for me, this is something that I have to continually brush up on and review and double check myself on because just basically, whenever you're conducting user interviews, you're almost like doing an anthropological study, if you will. And that's basically exactly what it is. I remember when I took a course in college in ethnomusicology, it was kind of the anthropological study of music in various cultures and such, yada, yada, yada. But did that, I remember the professor stating very clearly that whenever you begin to study another culture, you begin to study something else, your presence, your very presence in that culture, in that study, actually alters the culture. So just by you being there and just by your presence being known by whoever it is that you're interviewing automatically alters their perception, alters the culture. So what we want to do is try to minimize that impact as much as possible and to try to determine, where are we demonstrating bias, where are we demonstrating leading perceptions, whatever that might be. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we can begin to diffuse that and set up a real strategic template on how we do interviews. So the first thing you want to do whenever you're doing an interview with someone and kind of beginning that process is that you just kind of want to start with a warm up. And whether you're doing a usability test, whether you're doing more of a discovery type of study, whatever that might be, you're just going to want to start up with some general warm-up questions just to kind of get them loose and get them approachable. Then also you just want to make them feel comfortable in the interview process. Now, I know that a number of us have gone through some training programs. Maybe you went to college, got a degree, or maybe you went through some kind of certification, and you were presented with this type of scenario to where it was almost utopian of going, you're going to have access to researchers, you're going to have a lab, you're going to have access to all these users and be able to conduct usability studies and interviews whenever you want. And then we discovered quickly after our first job that was all a big lie. That it's going to be very challenging. Sometimes you won't have access to users. Sometimes you're going to be presented with a number of different challenging scenarios in order to be able to do what it is that you need to do. So in that, you're going to may have to actually have someone else conduct the interviews for you, such is the case for me. I'll give a little bit of background about where the kind of work that I do and the company that I'm in. I'm a lead UX designer for Duke Energy, and I work on what is called the internal UX team. So basically, we have about 30,000 employees across the country, and they are our customers. We're designing specifically for them. I am specifically within the regulated renewable energy unit, which basically is our power plants, our energy generating plants, our solar farms, whatever those may be. And so I'm helping to develop tools and solutions that would assist our plant workers in their job. And as part of that is that it's really going to be more beneficial to have someone that they know, a manager, supervisor, or someone that's worked with them to actually do this interview process and me be in the background as opposed to me doing it. They're going to be able to relate to them a lot better than I would. And those are some of the things you need to ask, is that if you're going to specific situations like that, you need to determine, are you actually the best person to do it? And there is a way to kind of do this in the background. I've had to kind of learn that. It's not perfect, but sometimes when that's the only thing that you're presented with, that's what you have to do. So you want to even help them to understand, hey, when you talk to this person, whatever, just warm them up, get them loose, and make sure that they're comfortable with the interview process. Next, you really need to have a current understanding of your current task and goals. It's very different if you're crafting questions for a usability study as opposed to if you're doing questions for a value stream analysis, or if you're doing questions for a discovery, trying to determine what the problem actually is. Maybe you're trying to do an ethnographic study or trying to just evaluate the culture and just the working environment that the worker is working in. So you need to understand, do you have a clear understanding of their current behavior, their tasks, their goals, and their motivations? And I can't emphasize this enough. You do not want to solely focus on digital products and services or solutions. the issues affecting them may not be related to something digital. I know that when we get into our mindset, we're UX designers and we're screen generators. Sometimes you're even just treated as, hey, you're a graphic designer. I want you to give me this screen, and that screen. And we all know there's so much more to it than that. But you need to consider all aspects of their environment and processes. And so one of the ways that you do that and to kind of drill down into that, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the 5 whys, that you literally don't want to go why, when you're interviewing someone. That can get a little bit irritating. But the principle of that illustration is you want to continue to drill down behind the behavior that you see or what it is that they're saying. You want to kind of find out what that foundational core is about what is kind of driving that behavior or that belief that they have. One illustration that I want to give in a product that I was working on, in our particular business unit, we're developing products that basically the same user are using. That this one user may be using 2 or 3 of the products that we're developing. And in one particular product, we noticed that the adoption was really quite low. Some of that was related to that we had released a minimum viable product that really was too minimum and didn't really generate enough value. We had to go back and really redesign that to escalate the value for that product. But there were other issues that we couldn't quite put our finger on as to why our adoption rates were so low for this particular product. So in this product, the other product that we were developing, this is for a safety protocol to where whenever a worker is going to repair a specific part or a specific device within a power plant, there are all these safety protocols they have to follow. And it is very regimented, very regulated, and it's very critical of that person's safety. Not just, it's really actually a life or death situation. And so we were developing a tool that would actually digitally walk them through that and make sure that they were working on the correct device and that they were shutting up the correct conduits of electricity and water and whatever that might be that could endanger them. So in the process of working that out, we were conducting interviews as far as their understanding and kind of an ethnographic study. So I had the opportunity to go down to Florida to one of our plants in Citrus, Florida, and conduct some interviews. And just basically really kind of open-ended. I just kind of wanted to discover what it is that they were thinking and what was going on. And out of this, it was really quite fascinating because out of here, you can probably see that there are a number of things here. Hey, we've tried this before. Yeah, we've heard about digital innovation and what Duke is trying to do, and we, think I've been in this company for 30 years. I've been in this company for 20 years. I've seen it, and sort of that pessimism that kind of comes with our particular culture. There were also things about, that I had concerns about the device that they were using. So just kind of created, if you will, kind of this empathy map about what they were thinking and they were feeling. And some of the things that we discovered that were really impeding the product in our interviews were these things. First of all, we had chosen, or the product owners had chosen, an iPad device to execute this particular product's goals. Well, the thing is that one of the things that the product needed to do was to be able to scan, OCR scan, or some kind of AI recognition, and then also take pictures of the various devices. Well, the thing is that when you are when you're in this particular environment, you have to adhere to a strict safety protocol. And if they're climbing a ladder, they have to maintain 3 points of contact on that ladder at all times. So that leaves them one hand with an iPad. If you've ever tried to take a picture with an iPad one-handed, it's impossible to do. And so that was presenting a problem. They were like, forget the iPad. I'm just going to take the phone out of my pocket and take a picture of it with my phone and email it to myself. So they were creating a workaround to the digital solution that we had. There was the issue too of in Florida that a lot of these plants are outside. We're no longer building plants that are solely contained inside. That a lot of these were outside. And so it's in the direct heat, in the direct sun. As you know, an iPad has a temperature threshold that it will shut down if it gets too hot. So they're in the middle of this, or they leave it on their golf cart or wherever it is that they're out there, and then it heats up and it renders it useless. And like, hey, give me the paper. I don't have to deal with this type of thing. Our particular culture at Duke, there's a lot of resistance to change. We're over 100 years old, and with a 100-year-old utility, that there's a 100-year-old culture. and there's a tradition and there's a way that things have been done. So there's this entire mindset that we had to navigate as well. Whenever the workers heard innovation, they thought, great, you're trying to get my job with this device. It was, they thought, this is layoffs. I don't want to use your tool because if I use it, then it's going to make it, it's going to probably put me out of a job. Then two, some people thought that a device is going to micromanage me. You're going to be surveilling my work. You're going to make sure that I'm, doing my job, whatever that might be. There are also dead zones of Wi-Fi within out the power plants. And sometimes you get into dead zone, they couldn't use it. So we had to accommodate for that in the design of the product. And there were just a number of things that we were discovering that went outside of some of the questions you typically might answer. And a lot of it was just asking an open-ended question and letting them talk, letting them volunteer the information, letting them get comfortable enough to where you began to kind of get all these little nuggets that was kind of leading to that. And so we had enough information here to go to our change management division and say, we need your help. There are some cultural issues that we've got to navigate that go outside the digital space that we're going to have to address. So this was a really kind of an interesting case study that I discovered in process of doing this early on. So with that, let's talk a little bit about, okay, how do we begin the interview process? Well, first of all, you don't want to lead with the product description because that's going to bias the participants' responses to your questions. Like I said, I would have product owners and such help me with the interviews. They knew the people, they could get them more comfortable and get more information out of them, and I stood in the background. But I had to coach them because they were saying, hey, we just designed this great product and it's awesome. It's going to make your job so much easier. So here, take it and play with it. Let me show you how that works and everything. And I'm just in the background going, oh my God, this is pointless. There's nothing I can do. And so I had to help them understand, look, don't try to sell the product. Don't try to sell what it is that you're doing. Just allow them to make their own determination about what their experience is. Let's talk a little bit about interview questions. Some of you have heard that, closed-ended questions are bad, open-ended questions are good. That's true to an extent, but closed-ended questions have their purpose. So a closed-ended question is going to invoke a yes, no, or once per week or something like that, just a very succinct and closed-off response. And a closed-ended question will typically lead off with did you or do you or would you, where it's just going to lead them into giving you a very short, succinct answer. Now, one way that you can use a closed-ended question is that sometimes when you get to interviewing someone, you've got kind of a chatty Cathy here and they're kind of going off on a bunny trail. You can interject a closed-ended question that will just have them give that one-ended answer and shut them down and give you enough of a pause to start off with the next question that you need to do. That can be a very useful way of doing that as well. So you want to wait for that natural pause in the conversation after you do that one-ended question to allow them to take a breath, and you can begin with the interview. So an open question is going to promote this elaboration, this exploration, as I discussed in the case study. You want to use this to elicit more detail about a topic. And typically open-ended questions are going to begin with why, how, or what, or where, something along the way to where it's just going to allow them to just kind of begin to expound and just kind of open up with that. So be aware of that as you're structuring your questions in your script moving forward. You want to avoid leading questions. Kind of like you hear this on TV shows for lawyer TV shows and such, that they're trying to bias the witness's answer by kind of giving them a leading question and evoking a specific response. You don't want to do that. You don't want to ask, hey, would this feature help you? But it's not about the feature, it's about the problem that you're trying to solve. So what are their goals? What is the job that they're trying to do? And then, let's determine what might be the best feature for that. Do you think this feature, be useful if it had it available? Anything like that is just going to kind of lead them toward a response that's not going to be your best scenario. You want to get qualitative rather than quantitative data. So I've seen this a lot, and I've actually been guilty of doing this a lot, but a lot of us sometimes will have one or two questions in their interview process with a Likert scale. And that's those scales of like 1 to 10 or 1 to 5 or 8, whatever it may be, but you constrain them within a limited scope, and it allows them to only give you a specific answer. And so you don't want to do that. That's great data specifically, for those within marketing. You're trying to get some kind of measurable or kind of quantitative type of figure. And those are necessary at times, but in this context, you're looking for what they feel, what they think. They're looking at their perspective. You're looking for that qualitative type of data. So you want to stay away from these type of Likert scales in these type of interviews. I'm not saying that they don't have a place, but I think that you need to be very strategic about how you use that and how you implement those. You don't want to place constraints, as I said before. For instance, does keeping track of reminders and to-dos make you feel good or bad? Well, what if the user had a feeling that was not good, not bad, something else? Maybe it made them feel anxious. Maybe it made them feel frustrated. Well, why does it make you feel frustrated? Why does it make you feel anxious? But if you limit them within that constraint, you're not going to be able to dig down to maybe discover something that you might not have been aware of moving forward. So you want to make sure that you're kind of staying away from that as much as possible. And then 2, don't ask them what they want. Thing is, that is your job to help discover what it is that they need. So it's, we get into this thing, and I've seen a lot of product owners and such do this and going, is this what you want? And the thing is that oftentimes the user doesn't know what they want. They know what their pain points are. They know what their challenges are. But by you asking them what it is that they want, then you're asking them to articulate something that they may not be able to articulate. They just know that they're frustrated with this aspect of their workflow, or they're challenged with this one particular task. And so you want to get to the bottom of what that surface frustration is, not by asking them, hey, can you give me the idea of how to fix this? Because ideally, that's what we're supposed to be doing. One thing that a lot of us are uncomfortable with is embracing silence, allowing these awkward pauses, allowing it just to kind of hang out there for a little bit. I know some of you have probably experienced this or tried this, but sometimes when you just simply let the silence exist, people are going to want to fill in that blank space. They're going to want to kind of fill in that silence and just sit there. And if you ask them a question and they don't give you an immediate response, just give them some time. Some people may process. Some people may need some time to think about what the question is that you gave them. But you want to be just very comfortable with embracing that silence. And again, if you're having to coach someone to do these interviews for you, that's one big point that you're going to really have to sell them on, is being comfortable with that awkwardness and that particular, silence. So let's talk about questions. Now, if you don't have About Face, The Essentials of Interaction Design by Alan Cooper, and there's a number of other authors there that are in this frame, I highly recommend it. It's an excellent book. It's a great foundational tool, and this is directly out of that particular book. So what Cooper does is that he breaks it kind of down into 4 categories of questions. And these are great examples of how you can use a schematic, if you will, in crafting your question. So are you going to have a goal-oriented question? What are their goals? What makes a good day, a bad day? What are the opportunities they're looking for? What are their priorities? What is the information that they need to help make decisions? So you can craft questions kind of in that goal-oriented column. There are system-oriented questions about what's the function, what's the frequency, what is their preference, what's the failure, how do they work around problems, and what are the expertise? Have they created some shortcuts? Have they created some workarounds? If they have, that can be really rich. That can be really insightful to helping you kind of maybe get an idea of where to go, or maybe how to kind of create, how to rework that workflow, if you will. Workflow-oriented questions, what is their process? What did you do when you first came in today? What did you do after that? This is something that I feel is really critical, because I feel that within our specific division, our innovation center and such, one of the things that we're discovering is that we are basically and sometimes are being asked to apply digital band-aids to workflow and process problems. The thing is that they don't need a digital solution. What they need to do is to put that concept aside, and they need to look at the workflow itself or the process or some of the business rules that are driving that need to be redesigned. As you know, that sometimes as a corporation it goes on and nothing has really been reworked or revisited, all of this bureaucratic red tape can get layered on everything, and it makes the workflow so much more painful. It makes the process so much more difficult. So you want to start asking some of these workflow questions that might expose some of those problems and help to determine going, hey, you know what, there's really more of an issue here. I would advise you to rethink how you do this entire process. And once you do that, then let's see if a digital solution is actually going to benefit you with that. But if you're giving that entree, if you're giving that kind of door into that process, that would be very helpful. And then attitude-oriented questions. What are their aspirations? What are they trying to avoid? And what's their motivation? So again, I really recommend this. And by the way, I will be providing a PDF of this entire presentation with all of this information on it if you would like. I'm not seeing ability to upload that in the chat, but I can get that email to you. I'll give you my email address at the end, and I'll also make sure that Gary has it as well. So let's talk a little bit about usability testing. So we talked about the interview process a little bit too, but we all know that plays into usability testing. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that you're going to have to help product owners deal with, and that you may need to deal with too in your designs, is what's called the Ikea Effect. And some of you may have heard of this. But it's when a team member has been heavily invested in the product, and you can demonstrate this bias by going to usability testing. It's kind of that concept like this. So I go to IKEA and I buy a $100 bookcase that I'm going to put together. I bring it home and I get the box and I put out the ridiculous amount of instructions in all 5,000 pieces it takes to put this bookcase together. And I spend the next 5 days trying to put this bookcase together. And finally, when I get it done, I put it in the room, put my books on it. I look at that thing and I go, that is worth $500 easy. If I had to resell this, I'm going to resell this thing at $500 because the value of it is so increased because of the effort and everything that you put into it. And even though it's still a $100 cheap particle board bookcase, because of what you invest into it, there's so much bias to it to where it's escalated its value in your eyes. That can happen with your designs, that can happen with a product, and that happens with product owners all the time. They've heavily invested into it, and they're going to have this bias going into it, and that's going to steer and drive the influence as far as how they do testing, as how they do interviews, whatever that might be. I wanted to show this. I found this clip. I thought it was just hilarious, brilliant, but just kind of how when you go into usability testing, some of the things that you kind of just have sometimes will encounter. So I'll play this real quick.
My asthma. They said they'd fix it, but it didn't make any difference at all.
Well, sometimes doctors make mistakes. Anna, you need to try twice as hard to fix them. Are you using your inhaler?
All the time. Go through one a week.
You sure you're using it right?
Do I look like an idiot?
No. Why don't you show me how your inhaler works?
Chuck. What was that all about?
Jamaican chicken recipe.
I love that. That is great. And there have been times where I've been doing a usability test, I've been doing something like that, and run into something very similar to that. We make assumptions that people know how to use the products. And even when you're writing your questions and you're doing an interview, you've got to go into this realizing that or leaving your assumption behind that people are going to know what it is that you want them to do. In many cases, when we were doing usability testing with our products on either a phone or an iPad, there were people that did not even know how to turn them on. A number of people don't even have smartphones. They have flip phones. They don't like technology. They don't spend time with technology. They don't trust it. They feel it's too fragile. It's going to break. So we had situations where we had to show them actually how to turn it on and or how to basically even operate it. So don't go into this assuming that when you're conducting your usability tests that user is going to know exactly what it is that they need to do in order to conduct it. You're going to have to kind of go in and leave that bias behind. So again, you're going to want to make the user feel comfortable, because when you're kind of doing a usability test and an interview process in that as well, there's going to be this anxiety of going, oh, I don't want to do it wrong. Whenever I do something, that's one of the first things that people say is that, oh, I don't want to make a mistake and mess you up. Like, you're not going to mess me up. In fact, if you fail, that actually helps me. I want to see, what your experience is on this product, and just helping them to be comfortable with that process. You want to remain neutral. You want to, if the participant is going to look over at you and ask you, what do you think? A good response is, well, I'm more interested in what you would do. Or what do you think you should do? And just kind of allow that to kind of just sit there, but to not give them any guidance. Now, there may be a time where they reach a particular point of struggle and frustration, and you need to kind of maybe jump in there to help them get to the next point, and you know that task has failed. But you don't want to see them struggle too long, but you do need to allow them to struggle on that. But you do want to remain neutral if they start kind of looking at you for answers. Again, getting them to think out loud in that kind of interview concept, because remember, even Joe, you're doing a usability test, you're also doing an interview in the process. You want to get them to think out loud. And sometimes they'll start out that way and they'll forget, and you can just kind of gently nudge them and say, hey, remember, I'd love to know what it is that you're thinking as you go through this. So can you just kind of talk to me out loud about, your process, and no matter how minute it might be or how unimportant you may think it is, I'd just love to hear kind of what's going on in your head. Don't help them. So a lot of times you want to get in there and jump, and you'll see them struggling. And for those of you that are kind of very mercy oriented, you want to jump in and help to alleviate whatever their problem may be. And you don't want to do that. There is beauty in the struggle. You want to watch them struggle. You want to see how many other different options they're going to try to get to before you actually, before they actually land where it is that they're supposed to, or they may not. But you want to see kind of what that problem is. A lot of times I've seen people too quick to jump in, and there's a lot of interesting or valuable information that was missed out in that process, because there may have been something that was catching their eye more, or felt more intuitive to go in this direction rather than the direction that you had planned. So you kind of really make sure that you don't walk in that scenario. And again, as I said before, you don't want to allow them to struggle to the point where they get frustrated and they want to quit. You kind of got to read that, and you got to be really kind of good at reading people and kind of understanding where they are. You want to watch yourself, your body language. If you're somebody like me, I don't hide things very well. And so you just kind of have to go in with just a very neutral face, and make sure that your body language isn't communicating any frustration, any anxiety or tension. Remember, you're there to observe, and you're trying to be in the background as much as possible, and you don't want to influence what's going on in that interview or that usability test. Out of sight, out of mind. If possible, position yourself behind the user so that you can look, and see their actions. But there's some great tools that are coming out now, or really you can kind of rig your own type of usability test tool by getting a webcam and putting it on some type of clip over the phone, where you can sit in front of them or sit some off to the side and watch their finger interaction on that phone or that tablet or the computer, whatever it is. There's a number of solutions that are coming out, and with technology the way that it's going and developing, there are a number of ways that you can kind of create your own lab, if you will, in doing this, and not so you're not directly over their shoulder. But if you do have to be there one-on-one and don't have access to that, you do want to just sort of be out of their peripheral vision and observing. And as long as they're comfortable with that. Sometimes I've noticed that the people are like, I don't like you over my shoulder, I'd rather you have next here. Great. whatever makes you comfortable. So just making sure that you're kind of being aware of your placement in that as well. And note etiquette too. You are there to take notes and to study, but it's really kind of disrupting when you're doing an interview and you're busy scribbling, or somebody says something, they start typing, and maybe they're thinking, oh, did I say something wrong? Or was that, why are they typing that? I feel kind of uncomfortable or exposed, whatever that might be. In that kind of situation. So you want to make sure that you're being very conscientious about how you are recording your data. If you can have somebody else come with you and they can be the note taker, that's ideal. But in a lot of cases, some of us are going to have to basically record the data and record the interview. Now, I'll put a note on this. It depends on the industry that you are in, that there are some things that you need to be aware when doing interviews and conducting usability tests. For us, we are a public regulated utility, and so within that we have labor unions. And so there are certain things that we can do and cannot do when regards to interacting with those within a labor union. We are not allowed to record anyone or do any kind of recording when we're doing these type of interviews, and we usually have to submit our questions to a labor union representative before we can approach them with that. So depending upon the industry that you're in, you might want to ask and be aware, are there any specific scenarios? Are there any criteria that need to be met as far as the company policy or any kind of union policy before I proceed with that? Because that can be a sticky situation sometimes. So you've got to be aware of that as well. So it's ideal to record if possible, but if you can't, then you'll have to kind of make do and just be as conscientious about your note taking as possible. And you want to watch and listen, look at their body language. I will sometimes put down and going, hey, they looked a little frustrated in their body language, or they you kind of threw their hands up like this when they were trying to get to a task or whatever it may be. But you want to just kind of watch and listen and look at the body language and listen for those little comments that they may make under their breath as well. And finally, to wrap it up, I'm going to leave some time for some questions as well. I wanted to just give you a few resources to look at and to kind of talk about as well. So click tests, for those of you that may be aware or may not be aware, if you were doing a usability test and interview, that first of all, the thing is that I highly recommend, and what you want to do is try to create a scenario task-based type of format. So the scenario is you want to put them in a context of what you're interviewing them for or what the usability test is about. So, in this situation, hey, you've just had your morning meeting, you've been assigned your work orders for your shift, and then you give them a task. And then you want to have some questions that are related to that task. And it really helps to set things very well. It's just kind of putting some tasks down for your usability test. You want to kind of create that context in which they're going to be doing those tasks, because that could greatly impact or influence your study and what you're trying to discover. There's some great tools out there. There are really too many to list, but I think there's usertesting.com. We use userzoom.com as we have a license for that to do our usability tests, and with that we're able to do some things such as heat index or heat mapping whenever we do a specific test. So you'll see here that we were testing this particular interface for a doc research tool and gave them a specific task, and we saw where people tend to click up here. What this is a progress bar, and people were actually clicking on the progress bar in order to navigate, when ideally what we were wanting to do is click down here on continue. But for some reason this was taking precedent and people were going up here thinking that this was interactive. And so it really helped us to say, whoa, wait a minute, before this goes into prod, we need to go back and redesign this, because this is throwing users off, because you can see the number of times that they were going up there and doing that. And this tool will give you some great stats and summarize your data for you very well as far as whenever you're doing any kind of tests. So those are some things that you can look at. I've got some metrics, median time on task, number of responses, the success rate for that particular one, and also kind of gives me some graphs as well to help summarize what the data would be for that particular one. So there are click tests that you can use in your interview process. Definitely want to write out a script. It helps you to stay online. I don't know if you necessarily need to read the script verbatim, word for word, but it definitely helps you to give a template and to go in knowing what it is that you're wanting to talk about, knowing what it is that you want to say and what you want to cover. So there's this concept, you want to write a script, especially if someone's helping you do the interviews, you want to give them some rails to run on and to know how to do this, in the way that you're wanting to see the results. You want to create a moderator's guide, have that, and I'll have some PDF examples of these as well that I could send if I needed those. But just kind of how you're going to do if you're helping, if you have some other people that are helping you with the interview process, you want to give them this, say, hey, here's the process, here's what you want to cover, and here's how we want you to proceed with that, and give some clear instructions within this moderator guide. The interview protocol, we would list going, hey, you're asking for people's time. People's time is precious. And if they're going to give you 30 minutes or 45 minutes, that's really a big deal. And you want to make sure that you plan for that to where you respect people's time and that you've kind of got this scripted out about how this interview and how this usability test is going to go. So you definitely want to try to create a moderator's guide, a data sheet for that, and just kind of map out your time. Again, especially if people are helping you, you're helping them to know what to expect and to work on. And finally, I'm going to recommend this one tool. If you guys have not discovered otter.ai, this is an excellent tool to use for user interviews. I believe that you get up to 10 gigabytes free per month on recording, which is honestly more than enough for what I've done for interviews. And what it does is that you can put an app on your phone, your iPad, you can do it on the computer website as well. And it will record the interview, and it does a pretty good job of translation as well. And it translates the interview directly into a transcript. You're not having to wait a day for this thing to be rendered. It is typing out the transcript as it goes, and then you're able to actually download that transcript in a PDF form and review everything, so you don't have to worry about missing anything. So I highly recommend that. You can set up a free account, and that gives you about 10 gigabytes worth of information there, or of recording time per month. And it's been very beneficial for us as we've been using these in our user interviews and our usability tests as well. So that is generally about it as far as what I've got to cover in that. I know you guys have listened to the droning sound of my voice for the past however long I've been talking, 30 minutes or so. So I'll be glad to open up for any questions that I may or may not know the answers to.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. That was awesome. That was really full of good info. Whoa, did I see somebody raise a hand? Maybe, did I? Yeah. Conchetta, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I raised my hand. It was very interesting. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. And you know, I tried to, I was figuring out my own experience while you were talking and try to do comparisons. So that's great. And I wanted to ask you one question, since you mentioned it, you know, that you work for a company where resistance to change is a thing. How do you deal with that? I mean, do you have suggestions? What kind of advice do you give? If you can, you know, mention anything with that respect, it could be useful.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wish I could tell you I figured it out, but I haven't. But what we do within our particular corporation, I don't know if you have this, but we have what we call change management. And their specific goal is to help us to navigate the culture and to achieve the best adoption that we can for our products. So they're going to, be acting as a liaison between our key stakeholders in the business unit, They're going to be interviewing them, talking to about what their concerns are, what their issues are, things that we need to consider in the development of the products, things that we need to consider as far as how these products will change the culture, because you have to think about that. If you're talking about digital transformation within any particular area, the moment you introduce that product into the culture, you've changed the culture. You've completely altered how the workflow that may be, whatever it might be. And so that's why you have to kind of almost go on a continuous discovery of what the problems are and what are the pain points that have come up as a result of you introducing that digital solution into that culture now. There almost has to be a continuous discovery. So if you have the opportunity to do that as well. But one key thing that I can't remember who said it, I wish I could take credit for it, but it was one particular speaker that said, people do not fear change or dislike change, they fear loss. And so when people are resistant to change, many times they are fearful of losing something, or they're resisting because they are concerned about there being some type of loss. So rather than pushing back on the change issue, one of the things you can go about one of the things you can kind of go about doing is saying, hey, well, tell me, what's your concern about the change? Is there something you're concerned about, maybe it affecting that you won't be able to do anymore, or that, let's talk a little bit about that. Demonstrating empathy rather than getting angry about the fact that they are resisting the change. Let's see if we can approach it a little bit more from an empathetic understanding and say, tell me why you're having this challenge, or can you help me to understand why you're having that challenge? Sometimes you're just going to hit your head against the wall and you'll have to know, well, I need to walk away. And honestly, there are products that I've worked on and going, they're not listening. This is not human centric. And I am a believer personally to where I think that sometimes you need to let the balls drop and let, the issues be exposed. And because, sometimes when you bang your head against a wall too much, you're the only one getting a bloody head. So you just kind of want to make sure that you're being aware of that and knowing when to push and sometimes when to it's best to just kind of back off.
So as a follow-up question, so when you say be exposed, you mean like report this to the product manager and say, look, this product is not going to work with the users, or you mean something else?
I think that I'm pretty vocal about, I'm going to go on the record voicing my concern. Of course, I always try to do it in a collaborative and constructive way. I don't want to be the voice of dissension on a particular product team, but if I feel that a product's going in the wrong direction, I may say, hey, I just want to raise this concern. This is where I see this going, and this is why. I will usually try to get as much, data cells. So if you can get data to back up your position, that's going to only serve you well. But I'm usually going to try to make my case, but I also have lived long enough to know that if I continue to reiterate and push and push and push, sometimes it's really going to wind up backfiring on me. And some of that too is just kind of reading the room and understanding how much you can push for change and how much you just need to back off and let the wheels fall off the bus, if you will, and then come in and go, okay, here's how we can do it better.
Thanks.
Hey, Jeff, Rob Krug here. I loved your presentation, very educational. I like your style, and this is a great reference material. That's why I'm being very selfish and would love to get a copy of the presentation. Hitachi had worked with a company called Mach 49. I don't know if you're familiar with them, an incubation type of company to teach companies how to do exactly. You have another career, bud, you just don't know about. They came in and they taught, why do startups become so successful, and a lot of it's what you're depicting here as far as how you interview people and try to glean the right information before you go spend a lot of money. So they were trying to teach a small group of us within the company, but this material is better than what they gave us. So I thank you. If we aren't onboard people, I think I'd love to share your strategic way of interviewing people, because we're in a space in Hitachi that's kind of between where products exist and where they don't. We're trying to solve a customer's problem that doesn't exist today. So we need to kind of co-create it with them. So I just want to say thank you. I appreciate this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I put my email in the chat, so please feel free to email me. And again, I'll send this to Gary as well. And basically what I have here, this is what you're going to get. When I said you're going to get the entire presentation, you're going to get it with the cute illustrations and everything as well. So this will be in one long PDF. And also the resource assets will be there as well.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
I saw Dana had their hand up next.
Yeah, I was curious about if you have had any great success or suggestions about how you go about sharing results, essentially. Is it a report or sort of sizzle reels or things? Because I end up with like, hours and hours of recordings and distilling it down. Sometimes can be a challenge.
Yeah, I think that, you put all that work into it. And before I created this wonderful 15-page report, and I've got a wonderful, beautiful PDF cover and all this. I mean, this thing is ready to publish, and I'll put it in the Teams channel. And I'm looking, going, has anybody interacted with this thing and read it? And I'll ask a week later, and like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to look at that. That can be so deflating to put that much effort into everything. And many of us probably are in agile environments, and that moves very quickly. And a lot of the products that I work on are 1-week sprints. So it's just, you got a week to get a lot of this stuff done. The product teams that I'm on with their 2-week sprints, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a vacation. I got 2 weeks to get everything done. But I think that you need to take the approach as you would with any type of report. Create an executive summary. And that's basically what I've started doing. It's just that, hey, here's an executive summary. If you want more, I'd love to schedule a one-on-one time, 30 minutes. Don't throw an hour at them. That's just going to be overwhelming for a product owner. I just schedule a 30-minute meeting, and I just kind of like to walk it through. I use Miro. This is what I've done the presentation in today. And what you're seeing on screen is Miro. And I live in Miro. I do everything in Miro. And so I'm able to kind of go through, and I even do this for my sprint reviews, is that, here are my stories for this particular ticket, and I'm going to go through, and that way I'm able to kind of do and if there's a tool like that where you can get them to interact with that and they don't have to respond immediately, they can leave post-it notes or something and ask questions that way. That way you're not commanding a lot of their time. But I think that, create that executive summary of those bullets. An executive summary should be basically this. It is a summary for an executive. So it's for the product owner, it's for that high-level person. Bullet points of the key points or discoveries that you've made, and make it a one-pager. Don't go 2 or 3 pages on that. That's not a summary. That's a report. Just do it that and give them that, and hopefully they will want more and ask for more. But that's kind of what I've started doing.
Yeah, that's smart. Thanks.
Faisal, did I say that right?
Hey, thank you for the session today. It was really interesting. I just have a couple of questions here, right? So in an ideal world, you would get one-on-one interview with the target audience, right? But generally, what happens with most of my scenarios is that when I'm doing interviewing, there are few folks on the call, right? From the customer side as well. And sometimes even on my side as well, because of many reasons, right? It's not a completely product-led organization. There can be many reasons for it, right? So any guidance on how to navigate that thing if you have multiple people on the call, right? From the customer, how to navigate between them, right? If you are looking to resolve one use case.
Right,
So
yeah.
this is one question, right? The second question, because I also do continuous interviews and continuous discovery as well, right? Sometimes you have to schedule multiple calls, right? To get through everything. So the first call is all good, right? I mean, you are not showing anything. There's no expectation, and you can start from the baseline, ask the user what they think. But in the second call, when you reach, there is some expectation from the other side, right? That okay, you are asking all these things. They would want to see something, right? I mean, it cannot always be like, okay, you are continuously asking, you have to display something. So what do you think about both of these things today?
Wow. Yeah, thank you for throwing me the softball questions. Uh, so regarding the group interview thing, I have had to deal with that so many times. And the reason why I have to deal with it is that we'll go to a plant and we'll ask a supervisor, hey, we need to interview some of your workers. That's a big ask, and they're paying them hourly, and these plant workers are not cheap. And so we're saying, hey, would you give us a couple hours of your time? And they're not accomplishing anything on the floor. So what they'll do is they'll pull them all in a room and say, great, here they are. And, we're not getting that stagger that we want. And I've had to conduct usability tests like that, which is almost impossible. So you're doing usability tests and they're watching the other guy do it. And it's just like, okay. And sometimes there's just really not anything you can do about it. Sometimes it's a thing where, I can give instructions, say, hey guys, as we're doing this, I'd love for you to just watch and observe and not interject. Probably not going to do that. The thing is, the usability test is already skewed because they've watched somebody else do it. But listen to the conversation. If they're going to talk, listen to it. Allow them to kind of say some of the comments. In the case what you're talking about where, it's a group interview, then let's take advantage of that interview context and going, sometimes we just have to realize that our ideal interview scenario is not going to happen. So how can we glean something out of what we've been given? And I think within that is to, rather than resist it, is to listen to the kind of side comments, listen to those types of things, because there could be some valuable data in that as far as what they're volunteering. Yes, they're biasing each other. Yes, you're kind of getting into groupthink within all of that, but sometimes that's all that you've got. And there's really not much of a way to navigate that. I wish I had a magical solution to go, hey, this will take care of that. The next question was, okay, remind me again what the next question was?
Doing few interviews with the common person, right? So there is one person, and for some reason you have to schedule multiple interviews, right? So in the
Right.
first interview, you can start with the baseline where you are not showing anything. You are going through asking their stories, their pain points, their needs, what they want, right? So that conversation goes very smoothly, right, in the first interview because they're not expecting much. But if you have to schedule follow-up interviews, right? Now on the other side, there is an expectation when next time you meet them that, okay, this person asked me so many questions, right? What's the outcome, right? They are expecting something.
Yeah, I think that in that case, when I've dealt with that, it's the fact they want to see something is that they want, in my cases, they wanted to be part of the process. They wanted to be able to speak into the process. And it wasn't, it's very, hey, I don't want you take this information and leave me out. I want to know that what I'm contributing is valuable. And so sometimes maybe you set the expectation of going, hey, we're going to conduct some interviews, maybe 2 or 3 interviews. And out of that, you may not see anything initially, but I promise you, we're going to have a meeting where we'll kind of give a demo. And and that's something that you should be doing as well, that if you get the opportunity with key stakeholders to do a demo for those key stakeholders to let them know where you are in the process. There was one particular product we were working on, and these people had come in literally with a spreadsheet of probably close to 40 features that they wanted on the product. And I'm asking, well, where did you get these? Where are these features coming from? And it was basically came from a product that we were trying to replace, and they had a mental model of what they wanted with that. But the point of that spreadsheet was that we want to know that our voice is being heard and that we're contributing, and we want to see the results in that. And so some of that may be that you simply say, hey, right now we're collecting data. And so you're not going to see anything initially out of that. You're not going to see a prototype. You're not going to see maybe even a wireframe or wherever that might be. But we do want to have a time to where we get to the point we have something to show. We want to make sure that you're included in that. And that's typically how I've kind of navigated those types of scenarios, is that I've just kind of set the expectation and made it very clear up front of what they can expect, but letting them know too that, hey, we're going to make sure that you're in the loop.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Awesome. Conchetta, do you have another one?
Yes, thanks. Actually, I have many, so I could, but I'll just pick one. The most pressing for me. So, since I mean the output of all the interviews, which usually are very rich, you know, it's basically an executive summary or something that you give to stakeholders. All the rest have to stick in your mind and kind of influence your designs ever after, or, you know, you have to pass along everything that you observed onto the people that are going to use that information somehow. How do you do that?
How do I pass along the information?
Right.
Yeah. I will do basically what I showed you. I wish I'd pulled that up. I could pull up a test, but basically I will create a board, and depending upon the tools that your company has and what you have used, if you have Miro, great. You know, maybe you have what are some of the other whiteboarding tools that you have, whatever, or you can even create a PDF. But I will actually put my report like this. This is actually a clip of one task in the report, and I will give them the information. I find that the product owners respond really well to data like this. If I give them paragraphs about, you know, me expounding upon my discovery and what I found, bullet points, short sentences. What is the crux of what you found? What is the key data elements that you need to present to this person? And I will try to find visuals or whatever that might be to kind of help to justify that. But typically what I do is that I'm going to put it on a board such as this and kind of lay that out. And that way they're able to go see it at their time, you know, at their leisure, and whatever's convenient for them, and they can kind of interact with it as well, leaving notes or whatever that might be. Another thing you can do is that, hey, can I have 30 minutes with the team and present it to the entire product team? Not make it just about the product owner, but there have been times that I'll present the results to the entire team and bring them into it. That to me is also really beneficial because it helps. I know a lot of us may struggle with the whole developer UX designer relationship and the lack of understanding on both sides sometimes of what the other does. And there have been times I've brought them into kind of a debrief of the test results like this, and I've seen the developers go, oh wow, okay, there's actually intention behind what it is that you're doing, and it helps them to understand. It kind of helps to bring them along as well, and then also it helps you to find out if there's something development-wise that you might need to be knowledgeable about. So I would recommend, you know, those two aspects of kind of putting it on a kind of a presentation like that. Keep it casual, keep it low key, unless you have a culture that demands something a little bit more formal. And then also bringing, you know, see if you can get some demo time with your product team as well.
So this approach is valid both for the initial discovery interviews and later on after the usability interviews. Is this, you would use the same restitution process, like a demo or a presentation?
Yeah, I think you got to gauge that. So if I'm doing a discovery, you know, I think it may be a way to share that with the team. I mean, you always want to include the team as far as what you're discovering and what the goal and the purposes of the product are and all of that. So you want to find a way to do that. I think they responded better maybe to the usability tests. And it also helps them to know, hey, this aspect of the design failed and here's why. And it may expose maybe a conflict that you've had with a developer or such, or going, you know, we need to do this particular we need to design this way, and it shows it failed, or vice versa, whatever that might be. But I think that you've got to gauge what's going to be beneficial. You don't necessarily want to go into a product team demo with a huge discovery, you know, report. But again, I would make those discovery reports. Basically, I'm trying to think here. You know, make them entertaining, make them visual in some way. of how you can, I'm trying to think, I don't have any of these pulled up. I got everything else pulled up, but something that'd be valuable here. But make them so to where it's visually presentable, that you can just kind of summarize and go through and use it in that way, to where, yeah, if you're going to present something like this, to where maybe you've discovered a particular flow of what that way things need to go, or you've done a mind map of what things are needed with that. You know, there's number of different ways that you can kind of design this to get the team involved and to help them to discover what it is that you found in the discovery interviews.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
David?
Yeah, early in your presentation, you talked about the 3-point safety that the folks had to do on the ladder. Got me really excited. Reminded me of times when I worked for a large grocery store chain, and we were doing usability tests in the bakery department. And they had to take the potential technology device into the freezer and leverage gloves, you know, so that there was that factor. Mm-hmm. Curious to hear any additional stories from you, given the industry, given the environment, whether it's that specific. Did you go back out and do usability tests? Did you have folks get up on a ladder, or are typically the usability tests behind a computer?
Yeah, and this is a situation to where you kind of had to let things fail in order to, because initially when I first came on board, I voiced my concerns about the selection of the digital devices. But what happened is that a product owner very far removed had made the determination to select iPads as the platform for this particular tool. And in some ways it made sense, in some ways it didn't. But they already heavily invested in it, and so this is what we were stuck with, and had to kind of let these things be exposed to move forward and kind of go, okay, now we got a problem. How are we going to design for that? But yeah, there were a number of things, like I said, as you said, in the freezer scenario with the grocery store worker, we had the issue too of, okay, if they're outside plants and it's cold, they're going to need to wear gloves. So we need to make sure that we're supplying them. So we actually had to kind of create an accessory pack to go with the tools as well, and provide them with touch sensitive gloves that would allow them to interact with the device, but also wouldn't be so cumbersome to interfere with their ability to work, and were resilient enough to deal with the harsh environment that they were in as well. So you had that. We had to provide lanyards. So if they're going to go up on a ladder with this device, it had to be able to be on a lanyard. They didn't want to put it in a belt or anything like that. So we had to do that, but the lanyard had to be breakaway, because if you're in an elevated environment and the device gets caught in a ladder or some piece of equipment and it pulls you, it's a strangulation, hazard. So we had to create them to where if there was enough pressure applied, that lanyard would break away. But then there was the issue, okay, iPad, and they're going to throw this in their toolbox and throw a 20-pound hammer or a wrench in that as well, or they're banging against all this metal device and such as well. And a lot of them were afraid to use it because, hey, it's, this is a $600 device, so who's going to pay for it if I break it? And so we had to get these otter boxes that they had to go into, these industrial type of otter boxes, to where if they dropped it from 10 feet or wherever it may be, it wouldn't destroy the device. So yeah, a lot of it was going through there, and it was really enlightening walking through these coal plants and just kind of seeing the environment there and following them. But there were, it's really fascinating because there were a number of issues too, to where there were some loud noises. A lot of these turbines and such make such loud noise that you can't necessarily interact. And we had designed the application to do voice to text, or take advantage of the iOS voice to text feature. But if you've got that issue with, you've got these huge loud turbines in the background, the static sound, it overrides that and it doesn't affect that. But the funniest thing that I found is that the iOS voice to text feature doesn't necessarily account for accents. So you've got these thick North Carolina accents trying to speak their notes into these things, and it is not translating well, and they're getting frustrated with it. And so you've also got to take into account the operating system tools that you want to take advantage of and readily use, but they may not be intelligent enough to deal with some of the scenarios that you're putting them in. So you've got to be aware of that too. So going, okay, well, we got to make sure that the keyboard is, big enough and operational enough to override that voice to text. So I can't recommend enough, if you get the opportunity to do ethnographic study and to do a follow on your user, the information you get out of that is just mind-boggling. So I would definitely push for that if it applies in your situation.
That's awesome. Yeah, environmental challenges are always exciting as a designer. And then my one follow-up, I just wanted to get your take. Usability testing on a prototype versus the final product. Are you a huge believer in both? Do you love usability testing on the prototype up front? What's kind of your do's and don'ts?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was an environment where we're constantly doing usability testing, but I sometimes if I get 2 or 3 good rounds, I consider it a success. So what our environment typically goes is that we are testing in UAT. We're testing in the pre-prod environment quite frequently, and it just makes sense. You want to get it done as early as possible and in the kind of the embryonic stage, if you will, to make sure you at least got the architecture and everything correct before it goes to prod, because then that's when the expense starts coming in. And as much as you're paying developers per hour to do all of that, it's a big ask to go back. Hey, we need to go back and do a redesign once it's gone to the prod stage. So I think that I think it would be ideal to do it throughout the entire scenario, but usually we're doing it on the front end.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Anybody else have any questions?
I have one last question, I promise.
Cool.
So how does the usability testing, it's a follow-up on David's question, how does then the usability testing merge into the agile process? Like you have a week turnaround?
Yeah.
Is it, right. Is it at the end of it? It happens after you designed all the different features, and or it happens throughout? I mean, for each feature you test, and then how does it work with moving from a screen to the next one, which probably you do at the last thing, right?
Right. I wish I had a profound answer for that, but I don't. So it's something that I definitely struggle with. And here's one of the main reasons why. That we need to remember that Agile was created by developers. And so it is very developer-centric in its structure and its format. So design has always had a struggle in trying to exist within the Agile environment. And I think there are people out there that can better articulate than I can about how to make that more successful. And I would love to learn more about that as well. But I do try to plan ahead and start putting a bug in the product owner's ear of saying, hey, because we operate agile, we operate in this concept of metered funding for our products. So basically what that means that every 8 weeks, we have to accomplish a certain number of goals and plan for the next 8 weeks. And we go before a committee and say, hey, this is what we accomplished. And will you give us money for the next 8 weeks? And they'll say yay or nay. And if they don't, then the product's dead or it continues on in development. So I'm operating in that time frame as well as within a sprint time frame as well. So I try to take the approach of looking at the product roadmap and going, hey, at this point of the product roadmap, we need to have done at least one usability test before we proceed to this next point of the roadmap. And I think that makes it a little bit more digestible rather than saying, hey, every 2 sprints or whatever, I want to do usability tests. Because you have to remember there are a number of factors too. If you're in my situation, I can't make that many asks of our users because then we'll start getting a lot of pushback and we'll lose some key stakeholders. So I'm trying to look at it from the product roadmap standpoint of going, okay, where are some key points that I can make that ask on that product and get the usability tests that I need done. And you may have to collect a number of different features you want to test in order to reach that. So you may need to think a little bit more of consolidating what you're trying to do at key points in the product lifespan.
Awesome. Great. Well, this has been a really awesome talk, Jeff. Thank you so much. And I think we had some really great conversation and follow-up questions there. Thank you so much again for presenting. And I will look for the email from you with the resources. I'll either attach them to the meetup or I'll send a follow-up email out to everybody that attended. Just want to plug again the State of IxDA survey, which is in the chat, and also I'll include that in all the emails. So please go fill that out. I see a couple people already did during the event, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that, and look forward to seeing everybody in February.
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it so much.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.